Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's form building webinar. My name is Nick, and I'll be walking us through the builder today. Today, we'll be talking about the calculation tool and how to use that calculation tool to automatically calculate a score based off of the selections made by the patient. So to do that, we'll also need to understand a little bit about how auto-population works, which we will talk about first. So let's go on down to the Packets and Forms page. And we're going to be working off of our FormDr training packet today. We'll go ahead and click the three dots on the right side of that packet and edit forms, which will take us into step one of the builder. And here we can add or remove any tabs on this packet. Today we'll be working off of a new tab, so I'll go ahead and add a scratch tab for us to have a blank area to build out. I'll just title it Calculation Tool. We'll save that tab title, and we'll go next to build. This will take us into the builder itself, where we can update the actual forms using the elements on the sidebar as well as the formatting tools down here at the bottom. But we'll go ahead and click on over to our new tab that we've added for the calculation tool. And we can see that it just is going to come with the patient name. All scratch tabs will, when they are added, they will come with the patient name by default. And that's simply because that patient name widget, whichever information is filled out in the first and last name fields of this widget, that is going to be the name that this submission is stored under on the send and receive page. So it's very important to only use this patient name widget for the patient or the person whose information you're intending to collect and store it under. All other names should just be taken with the general text field instead. Now, to explain why also feeds into the auto population. If we hover over our patient name and we click that orange pencil icon to open it for editing, we'll notice that when we look at the placeholder information, we have our first, middle, and last name fields. And if we go over to the right side, we have a field name section. These field name shortcodes are already set, and you'll notice that we are unable to change these at all. These are always going to be set for the patient name widget. And because we cannot change them, that is why if we were to add another patient name widget, those shortcodes will remain the same. And anytime information is filled out in those fields that share the same shortcode, they will fill out in all other widgets that share that shortcode as well. All right. So because these are all the same, as soon as one is filled out, the others will be too. And that means that on the very first page, the patient puts their name in. This patient name widget will autofill on in every other location that it exists, which is why you don't want to use this for a guardian name on the very last page, because as soon as that guardian puts their name in there, then it's going to overwrite all those patient names in the previous tabs. And if it is that last field that they fill out on that in that packet, they're not going to realize that. They're going to enter their name and submit that, and it's going to come in under their name instead. So just keep an eye out for that. But you'll notice that our text field down here that we've added is not autofilling with any of that information. So let's go ahead and take a look at the shortcode for that one. We'll click that orange pencil icon, and right over here we have that field name shortcode, one that we can change. You'll notice that it's a random collection of letters, and any added inputs or added elements to the form that are not the patient name widget will have a randomized shortcode generated for them that is not used anywhere else in that packet. That is to prevent any unwanted auto-population. However, if you do want that to auto-populate, you're just going to want to make sure that those two fields share the same field name shortcodes. It does not necessarily need to be this randomized collection of letters. It just simply ensures that it's not being used elsewhere in the form, but you can change this. Maybe this is an address question, and you're going to be asking for the patient's address later on down the line in the form. And so you can change this to maybe say address, city, state, and zip. It doesn't have to be those randomized shortcodes. You won't be able to have any spaces in here, but if you need to add a second word, I just recommend camel casing. Maybe it's patient address or something. Much like that. Just something that you can remember if you are going to want a field to auto-populate later on in the form. That way you don't have to click back to this tab and grab that randomized shortcode that you're never going to remember. Just know that once you have used a shortcode in an element, you won't be able to use that in a different shortcode or question or in a different element unless you want those two to autofill. So it's very important to just remember that as you're going through. Once you have used them, unless you want that to autofill, you won't be able to use that shortcode again. So for instance, if we were to add another address field, if we don't want to set this up again, we can always just duplicate this question by clicking that duplicate button, and it will add that all the exact same. The only difference will be that those shortcodes will not regenerate, they will generate new ones. So we can go in and add these again: address, city, state, and zip. And now they share the same shortcodes for each of those inputs. And when we go to the style page, we start to add that in. 1, 2, 3, test, test, test. And then we can move this address field to any of the other tabs if we want. It's very simple. If you have built it on that same page, you'll just want to open that up for editing and use the move function down at the bottom. You'll be able to select a tab to send that to. Just make sure to click that move button and it will send it to the very bottom of that page, at which point you can either use the arrows to move it up or down in the order of that page, or you can just click and drag it. Even while I'm holding it, can use my scroll wheel on my mouse and just drop it into the desired position. All right, now that we've gone over auto population, we will need to utilize this functionality a little bit whenever we go into the calculation. So I always like to just demonstrate how to use that and the importance of those shortcodes for each of those elements as well. If you do find that when patients are filling something out on your form and it's auto-filling somewhere that you don't want it to be, it will be that they are sharing the same shortcode. To get around that, I just recommend opening up one of those elements and just duplicating it, because again, it will generate brand new shortcodes for that, and you won't have to build out that element again. You can just delete out the old one, the one that's auto-filling, and you're going to be good to go. But let's go ahead and get rid of all of these. We'll leave that one patient name widget on there. But let's go ahead and add a calculation tool. We'll take a look at this really quickly. We'll open that up and we'll see what it has to offer. We'll be able to open that up and update the question title. Maybe this is going to be total score or something instead. And then we'll take a look at the other fields available. Our calculation expression. This is where we're going to enter our mathematical equation that we want this to calculate. It is a very powerful tool, and it will calculate any mathematical expression as long as it's correct. The only thing to note is that the system does use brackets to indicate something that needs to be calculated. So if your calculation has brackets within it, I would recommend setting up a second calculation tool to calculate what's inside those brackets and then proceeding from there, which we could get into a little bit later as well. But let's go ahead and leave this here for now. We'll come back to this calculation expression here in just a few moments. We'll take a look at our filter. You can send that to percentage or dollars. We'll leave it at no filter, as it will just be a score. And then you'll notice that the calculation tool also has its own randomized shortcode. We'll leave that alone as well, and we'll just close that up. The calculation tool was designed to be used with the rating scale widget, which we will place in here. However, it can be used with any widget that has a value field. Now, if we open up our rating scale, we'll notice we do not see a value field here. For this widget, you will need to use the custom ratings setting. But if you leave this at default, it will just have the satisfied and unsatisfied answer selections. We can add as many questions as needed. Just for ease of demonstration, we'll leave it at 3 for today. And the rating scale itself will have a shortcode as well, as does each question. So you can think of this as a multi-widget, if you will, with one parent widget being the rating scale and a bunch of individual questions within. All sharing the same answer set, of course, and we can also set those values, but first we're going to need to update that ratings selection. So we're going to click that ratings dropdown. We'll be able to select from some other preset options as well, but if we want to use this with the calculation tool, we're going to need to select that custom option. When we select that custom option, we'll be presented with a brand new area where we can update the answer selections on this rating scale. Again, just to simplify, we'll get rid of the ends here just to keep it unsatisfied, neutral, and satisfied. And then we'll be able to set the rate value. The rate value is going to be the number that is calculated in that calculation tool. So we can leave unsatisfied at 0, we'll set neutral to 1, and satisfied to 2. So now when a patient selects satisfied, that will be worth 2 points for that score, neutral 1, and unsatisfied 0. Next, we're just going to need to set up our calculation expression. And to do this, what we're going to do is we're just going to set down some sets of brackets here. I'm going to set down 3 sets of brackets because we're going to want to calculate 3 questions from our rating scale. So I'm going to set down a pair of brackets, a plus sign, brackets, plus sign, brackets. We're just going to keep this one simple today and just add these up. And now all we're going to need to do is copy and paste the question name shortcodes into those brackets in the calculation tool. That will let us know what we're calculating. So we'll be calculating the answer selection of question 1. Then we'll copy this one for question 2 and for question 3. Again, you do not need to have these as those randomized shortcodes. You'll notice that even with just these 3, this can get pretty large. So if you have a rating scale, or if you're calculating many questions, 20 or 30 questions, this can get kind of jammed up and a little confusing if you do need to go in and update all of that. So you don't necessarily need to use these randomized letters. Again, we can change these. So we can make these a little bit shorter. I always like to name them, if you're going to have multiple questionnaires that you're going to want to calculate up, I always just recommend keeping it specific to the actual questionnaire. So if it's a PHQ-9, for instance, maybe I would make this PHQ-1, and then PHQ-2, PHQ-3, just as those question names, something that we can remember. And that way, if you do need to go back and update something in that calculation, you just look for question number 3, PHQ-3. Or if it's a GAD-7, for instance, GAD-1, GAD-2, whatever the case may be. Just for the purposes of this demonstration and to keep it super simple, we're just going to do Q1, Q2, Q3. Oop. Now, again, we won't be able to use Q1, Q2, or Q3 for any other one, or for any other elements unless we want those to be auto-filled. So we'll just need to keep that in mind if we do have other questionnaires, if we're going to keep using that naming style. So we'll just take these shortcodes, this Q1, Q2, and Q3, and we'll close that up, open up our calculation tool, and we'll replace these shortcodes, Q1, Q2, and Q3. We'll leave this now, and we'll click that Done button. We'll go on over to our style page. Everything is set up correctly. We'll double check that, open up our rating scale, make sure that our question name shortcodes are set correctly, our value area is set correctly, and our brackets. You want to make sure to double check those brackets because this will not function if you put a parentheses in on accident. So we have everything set up correctly. Let's go to the style page to test that out. Whenever the patient selects an option, then it will auto calculate that score, but it is not doing that here. That is because the calculation widget is the only widget that will need to be tested out on a live version of the form. So we'll go ahead and click Next to Publish, and we'll click Finish Building, go to My Account to save those changes, save those additions, and we'll go back to the Packets and Forms page, and we'll click that public link of our FormDr training packet to bring us to a live version of the form. We can click over to our calculation tool, and then now once we select our options, we can see that that total score is adding up for us. And it will update upon reselections. It will always just adhere to whatever calculation you have in there. I mentioned earlier that if you have a form or a calculation that has brackets within it, which I have seen before, again, the system will read the brackets as something that needs to be calculated. So in that case, what I would recommend doing is maybe this first score, maybe this was what was in the brackets. Our question 1, 2, and 3 has been added up, and we need to do something else with it. So we'll go ahead and place another calculation tool, and this will be, final score. And then we'll just change this to score so that we don't get confused. And so for our final score, maybe we're going to take the sum of those 3 questions, which we'll put into a bracket, and then we'll multiply that by 10, just to be simple about it. Usually in these cases, if there's a bracket within a calculation expression, then it's got multiple steps to do, but just to keep it simple, we'll do this here. But I would recommend setting up the information within that bracket for the calculations section in one calculation, and then we can take that calculation tool's name shortcode and enter that into the bracket for our second one. And again, we're going to save that up, publish that, go back to our packets and forms page, open up that public link, go over to our calculation tool, and now whenever we start to select, we'll have the sum of those 3 questions with their value times 10 in that final score. So you will be able to calculate the output of another calculation tool. And that being said, you can get very creative and very deep with that to calculate all sorts of stuff. As long as your math is correct and you have the imagination for it, it is a very powerful tool and can do a lot of things for you. All right. Oh, we are running a little short on time. I'm going to go ahead and open up that chat. Also, just in case anybody does have any questions, I'm happy to answer those prior to us closing up today. In the meantime, I'll show you just one other thing that you'll be able to use with that calculation tool. So we'll go back to that calculation tool. And again, as I mentioned earlier, you can use this with any widget that has a value section. So to get that value section on our rating scale, we had to open up that custom rating section. But if we were to use a selection option question, such as our single select option, which would be your typical yes or no question, or even a drop-down widget, both of these will have a value section on the right side of the answer selection. So we can set that value, yes being 1, no being 0, and we can include this shortcode, this name shortcode up here, in our calculation expression. Maybe final score is times 10 minus shortcode from our single select option, and then divided by another set of brackets for our drop down, which will also have a value section on the right. So we can do, maybe this is 3 and 4. I don't know. Let's get silly with it. But we'll copy and paste our shortcode from our dropdown into that final score, into those brackets. And now based on the answer, the sum of these 3 questions and the answer selections that they've made on these 2 questions, we'll get our final output here. We'll save that up. Next to publish, back to account, packets and forms, public link. Test our calculation tool, satisfied, neutral, satisfied, yes, and 2. So we've added up everything, we've multiplied it, and then we've divided it. All right. So the calculation tool can be very useful, can be very interesting to use as well. I've seen it used in all sorts of different ways. Typically, though, you will find it most commonly used to calculate a score of a questionnaire, and I find it does a very, very good job of doing that. But that will conclude this webinar today on the calculation tool. It does not look like we have any questions coming in, and we are running out of time, unfortunately. But just as a reminder, we do host these form building webinars every Tuesday and Thursday at 11:30 a.m. Pacific time. We also host onboarding webinars every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. Those will be held at 10:30 a.m. Pacific time. If you would like to keep up with the schedule of our form building webinars, you can always go to My Account, Support, and Search Guide. This will take you to our product guide, and we'll have many, many articles in here that can answer all sorts of questions just in terms of using the account, setting up users, sending forms, updating forms, building forms, or even setting up integrations on your account, which can be found in the send and receive page, for instance. If you're looking for bulk exporting to Google Drive, for instance, we can click on that article. We'll have some imagery in here with some step-by-step instructions to help you get all set up by the end of the article. If we go back, though, to that home page of our product guide and we click on the FormDr Updates section down at the bottom right of this menu, this will take you to our recent release notes, which can be found on the right, and our webinar schedule, which can be found on the left. If we click on that May webinar schedule, for instance, you'll get some information on what the onboarding schedule will look like, and you'll be able to sign up for any of those just by clicking on the date that you would like to attend. The onboarding information won't change too much from webinar to webinar. However, the form building webinars will. So we will have a description of what we'll be going over for each one of those days. If you are interested, again, you'll just need to click on the title of that day. It will take you to the sign up page for that webinar. And if there's anything that you're interested in joining us for, but you won't be able to be in attendance, don't worry, we will be posting those recordings after the fact as well. And once you click on this posted click here link, this will take you right to our YouTube channel. We'll have some timestamps at the bottom of that video as well, and you'll be able to watch that at your leisure. But again, today was going over adding calculations to forms. Please join us again on Thursday, where we will be going over advanced calculations. So we'll get a little bit deeper into that, into some of those creative ways, as I mentioned earlier. But thank you very much again for joining us today. If you do have any coworkers or staff that would like to learn this information, or if you would like for them to learn this information, please feel free to send them our way. These are all free, and we do encourage everybody to join as often as they like until they're comfortable with the product and beyond as well. But thank you very much and have a great afternoon. Hope to see you again very soon.